Ukrainians are frustrated with many of the decisions that Zelensky has made, and Fedorov's firing is just the latest one. Last year, in August, there was the attempt to remove the independence of NABO and ZAPO, the anti-corruption prosecutors and police. And there is a sense that Zelensky has been appointing people into positions that are more politically reliable than competent. And that's one of the things that Fedorov calls out. So I think reaction has been kind of polarized in Ukraine.
Ukraine's former defense minister, Mykhailo Fedorov, has called for an election in which what could be the biggest domestic political challenge to Volodymyr Zelensky since Russia's full-scale invasion in 2022. Ukraine's constitution doesn't allow elections to be held under martial law, but Fedorov has accused Zelensky's government of a systemic crisis of governance and corruption. Well, Jimmy Rushton is special correspondent at the Kyiv Independent, and we have him now. Hello, Jimmy.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks for being with us again. Look, how serious a threat is Fedorov's call for an election to Zelensky's position?
I think it's probably the most serious challenge that he's had since the beginning of the full-scale invasion. And it comes after a period of significant protest that started when Fedorov was dismissed as his previous post as defense minister. These protests ultimately didn't get Fedorov back in his position, but did lead to the dismissal of controversial commander-in-chief Volodymr Zelensky, and there are still protesters on the streets. And obviously now you're seeing this direct challenge to Zelensky's authority.
How popular a figure is he, Fedorov? And why is he so popular?
So he is popular. His popularity is around the same level as Zelensky, who was the previous commander-in-chief. So he has he's polling about 30%, depending on which polling agency you read. And the reason why he's popular is he was viewed as an effective and reforming figure in the Ministry of Defense. He was viewed as an anti-corruption campaigner. He also had a close relationship with Elon Musk, and he managed to persuade Elon Musk to deactivate Starlink for the Russians, which was incredibly significant on the battlefield. He was also behind some of these big Ukrainian drone campaigns, which have been hitting targets in Russia. He allocated significant funding to these campaigns, and many Ukrainians view him as giving the Ukrainian military a bit of a spring in its step. Most Ukrainians, in fact, simply didn't understand why he was dismissed with almost no notice.
So, Jimmy, he said democracy cannot be held hostage by Russia, and it's true that the last presidential election in Ukraine was more than 7 years ago. But how should we interpret this? Is he somebody who's now been cut loose, who's saying what everybody's thinking that he hadn't been able to say before? Or is this part of him launching an assault on Zelensky, and this is just a convenient way to do it?
I think it's a bit of both. I think Ukrainians are frustrated with many of the decisions that Zelensky has made, and Fedorov's firing is just the latest one. Last year, in August, there was the attempt to remove the independence of NABO and ZAPO, the anti-corruption prosecutors and police. And there is a sense that Zelensky has been appointing people into positions that are more politically reliable than competent. And that's one of the things that Fedorov calls out. So I think reaction has been kind of polarized in Ukraine. Many Ukrainians are saying, well, we agree with a lot of what you're saying, but there's no ability for us to hold elections during martial law during this war. But then there are some Ukrainians who say, yes, Zelensky needs to remember that he's governing under extraordinary circumstances, and he needs to be more consensual in his approach, and he needs to start governing, for the entire country, and he needs to start putting people into power who are first and foremost competent and capable rather than just politically reliable.
And if there were an election, and I appreciate there's at present no particular facility for that to happen, but if there were one, could Zelensky lose it?
He could. I think there are a number of candidates. Zelensky would be one of them. Fedorov would be another. And then potentially some wild cards. Potentially Beletsky, who's the commander-in-chief he's the commander of the Third Army Corps, and a couple of others that you might not even see coming. I think the interesting thing is that before this crisis, before Fedorov was dismissed, nobody was really talking about him being a potential challenger, even a potential political figure. And he has almost become one overnight because of the actions of Zelensky in dismissing him with no notice.
Finally, what impact does this political instability have on the war itself? I mean, presumably it doesn't help.
I don't actually think it has that much impact on the day-to-day on the front. There is obviously political instability is not helpful, but having kind of robust political debate is part of what makes Ukraine a democracy. And even though we haven't had elections here, there has still been, democratic accountability. There have been protests. There have been, the free press, and Ukraine does have a robust free press, which the Kyiv Independent is part of. So I don't think it's having an effect on the front, but I think if there is, prolonged periods of political instability, that could have a more insidious impact moving forward.
Thank you very much indeed, Jimmy Rushton there, speaking there from Kyiv.
Kira Rudik is the leader of the Liberal and pro-European opposition party in Ukraine and joins us now. Kira, morning to you.
Hello, good morning, Stig, and thank you so much for having me.
It's great to speak to you as ever. We've always said elections are impossible in wartime in Ukraine. So what's Fedorov up to? Is he right that there should be elections sooner rather than later?
With all my respect to Minister Fedorov, and we have been working together for 7 years, I think nothing changed. His dismissal didn't change what is written in our constitution, that there cannot be elections during the wartime. And we are currently concentrating on how to survive a very hard winter that is in front of us, and he knows about this. Obviously, he is very upset because of his dismissal. There were chances that he will be returned because of the protests. And before Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine, our parliament went back from summer recess. However, yesterday, President Zelensky submitted the new candidacy for the Minister of Defense, Mr. Yevgeny Khmara, to the Rada, and I think he will be voted in today. I will be voting and supporting him simply because we cannot be without the Minister of Defense during the wartime. And this is what triggered Mr. Fedorov's video and his statement regarding potential elections in Ukraine. I still strongly say we cannot have it. It will break our country. It will give Russia an enormous leverage. And we should not be going to such a depth like offering elections for our political ambitions. That's not something that I can support.
Is there any worry that, and you do hear this whispered by people, not pro-Russians either, people who are just interested in Ukraine, that Zelensky by default has become a sort of king-like figure, that this war could go on for 3, 4, 5 more years. He'll remain as president. He doesn't have checks and balances with him. He's become not quite a dictator, but with sort of autocratic powers he shouldn't have.
This is true. And there are many political discussions about that. But in current situation, it's not elections that we should be craving. We should be trying to, in the situation like this, to make sure that the existing by the constitution's checks and balances would be working better. Yeah. And we are parliamentary presidential republic, not even a presidential republic. So it's more a call for a parliament to step up and become more independent and make sure that we are keeping president in check. Again, the elections would be a massive disaster during wartime. They will be incredibly dangerous, and I still do not see a really feasible way to conduct them.
Is there a world in which Zelensky hands over power to someone else? Again, it's not democratic, you can't have elections, but he's been doing this for a long time. Could that ever happen where Zelensky says, I've done my bit, someone else needs to have a go?
According to the constitution, he can do it, and he can give the power to the head of Ukraine's parliament. However, I seriously doubt that will happen.
Yeah, that's probably most people. History will tell us that very few people voluntarily walk away from power, and also he would say it's necessary for the war effort. Just finally, Kira, Russia threatened the UK yesterday for its support for Ukraine. We're supplying drones are now being used very successfully in Russia. I don't think the UK is particularly worried about that, but what do you make of Russia threatening the UK for providing drones to Ukraine?
This means that you are doing everything right, and we are really grateful for it. Russia starts threatening when they are out of any other means to deal with the country, with their opponent, etc. They have been doing the covert operations in the United Kingdom throughout the NATO alliance for decades right now, and we have all know them and we have seen them. So the fact that they started openly threatening means that they fear that that would have a real influence on the war in Ukraine and that would really weaken Russia. This means that it is working, what you're doing. Thank you so much for this.
Kira, good to speak to you as ever. Thanks for taking the time.
Thank you.
That's Kira Rudik, the leader of the Liberal and pro-European opposition party in Ukraine.